Yo, what's going on YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and we are taking a look today at the latest on the Colorado Avalanche. There's a lot of stuff going on over in Colorado. Joe Sakic is definitely working the phones, so we'll be going over that today. So the first little bit here on the Avalanche is the latest on some of the forwards they're looking to add to their roster. Guys, the Avalanche see a window of opportunity here. They're a really solid team, definitely a contender. Nathan MacKinnon's due for a contract this summer. The Avalanche are going to have some shifting this offseason, so they're looking at a couple of guys that could help them win this season. And they've been linked to a couple of different names. So the first one here from Rick Dhaliwal up in Vancouver. I'll give you a hint, there's a couple Canucks guys in here. The Colorado Avalanche have called on Canucks forward Connor Garland. I definitely see a fit there. I think Connor Garland is one of those guys that fits the mold of what the Avalanche are looking for in terms of that depth scoring. Kind of a guy like they lost in Jonas Donskoy when he went to the Seattle Kraken. They were actually looking at bringing back Jonas Donskoy. That was on the table for them. So I don't think it's too much of a surprise here that is something being considered. And I think that's definitely that would be a good move. I think Connor Garland, as well as some of these other names, he's pretty similar to some of these other guys we're talking about. But I do see a fit there. The Colorado Avalanche have been linked to Blue Jackets forward Max Domi, and that's from David Pagnotta. Max Domi, again, a very similar player in that sense. He's actually done a little bit better here recently. Max Domi would probably be a little cheaper than Connor Garland. He is a pending UFA this summer. Connor Garland is not. He just locked up, signed that big contract with the Canucks last offseason when they traded for him from the Arizona Coyotes. So in that sort of scenario, you're looking at more of a long-term thing with Garland. With Max Domi, it's more of a short-term. We'll see if this works up until the end of the season and maybe a nice playoff run. Another name that Joe Sakic and the Avs have been linked to, again from David Pagnotta, the Colorado Avalanche are believed to have shown interest in forward Artturi Lehkonen. This is a Montreal Canadiens young guy. He's done pretty well for the Habs. He's definitely a Marc Bergevin-esque player. And he's fit in really well with the Habs. Now, there's been some questions with how the Habs have been this season. How far down the rabbit hole are they going to go in terms of selling off? We're hearing a lot of names being thrown out there. They're trying to clear a ton of cap space out, maybe for a busy summer. So does a guy like Artturi Lehkonen fit the bill of a guy that could get traded? Now, the thing here with Artturi Lehkonen, that's maybe a little different than Domi and Garland. Artturi Lehkonen's a little bit younger. He's 23 years old. And this is a guy that you're going to have to figure out. I believe he's an RFA this summer. So that is something you're going to have to consider. So you have a little bit more control over him as a player this summer than, say, a Max Domi, who would just basically walk him right into unrestricted free agency. So it might cost a little bit more for the Avalanche to get Artturi Lehkonen, but it may be worth it longer term in terms of what they want moving ahead. Now, this is another report that's more recent. The Islanders played the Colorado Avalanche last week, and it sounds like Sakic was pretty impressed with Semyon Varlamov's performance. This is from James Nichols. The Avalanche may have trade interest in goaltender Semyon Varlamov. He's had a rough season for the Islanders, but in a small sample size here, especially in that game against the Avs, almost 50 shots against, he played quite well and kept the Islanders in that game. And I think that the Avalanche said, hey, you know what? Why don't we consider bringing Varley back to the Avalanche? So what's good about Varley as well, unlike some of these other goaltenders, you're not really sure if Fleury's even on the market, if he wants to go to the Avalanche. Those are all things that have to be considered with Fleury. That's going to be a tough one to get done. Who else is really out there? Jonas Korpisalo, the guy from Dallas, Anton Khudobin, maybe Braden Holtby, Alex Georgiev. Those are the names you're looking at. Are they difference makers? None of them really. But the thing is with Varlamov, you get another year out of Varley. His contract ends next summer. Now, that could also be a bad thing. He's getting paid $5 million for this season and next. Will the Avalanche have the money to eat up that dollar amount for this year and next between Darcy Kemper and Semyon Varlamov. That's going to be an interesting development, but that has definitely been thrown out there. Now, this is where we get to the good part of today's video. So this is the first report from Darren Drager. The Avalanche have been one of the teams in on Canucks forward JT Miller. And that really comes as no surprise. We know the Avalanche have been looking for that type of player. They've been tied to Claude Giroux, Joe Pavelski, Travis Konechny. They've been tied to a couple of different players. But we started to hear even more stuff here on JT Miller. This is from Jeff Merrick. The Avalanche may be looking at JT Miller to replace Nazem Kadri this offseason. And that's, again, it makes sense longer term. His contract ends next year. So, again, kind of like Varlamov, you get a little bit more than just 1 year out of him. But the problem is, you're going to pay more for him. He's not a pure rental. You have another year, a full season, and this playoff run of that player. It might be a little bit costly, and I think that's why the Canucks have not made that trade. It's because they're thinking to themselves, unless you're going to give us really good value for a guy that at the beginning of the year, for a lot of people thought he could be a Hart Trophy finalist. Like, he was that good for the Canucks. So they're not going to trade him for something less than they want. And considering we're still a year out from free agency for JT Miller, that's not necessarily an urgent issue for them. And again, considering where the Canucks are at, they could still be a playoff team. Do you want to trade JT Miller out right now? And with the chemistry of the locker room and everything, that's something they're going to have to consider here. Now, this is where things, again, going back to the Canucks side of things, it all ties together. You'll see it in a second. This is from Elliot Friedman. Bowen Byram and Nils Lundqvist are names that have been heard around the Canucks. So Nils Lundqvist is the New York Rangers prospect. He's currently been up and down between the Hartford Wolfpack of the AHL and with the big squad, with the Rangers. The Rangers have a lot of really good young defensemen. Guys like Keandre Miller, Braden Schneider. They probably don't want to trade those guys. So Nils Lundqvist's name has been thrown out there. It would be weird to have a couple of years. They just got Lundqvist, his name hung up in the rafters. They have another Lundqvist. Do they want to get rid of him? I don't know. But we're not talking about the Rangers today. It's more about Bowen Byram. Now, it kind of fits the theme. They want a younger defenseman. He has a little bit of NHL experience, but maybe there just isn't a spot for him in the top 6 for the defensive team that he's on. And that kind of fits the bill here for Bowen Byram. Now, the reason this is all being talked about, even last week I saw a game, Bowen Byram was scratched for the Avalanche over guys like Jack Johnson, Eric Johnson. What's up with that? So I understand where the Avs are coming from. They're a team that's trying to win the Stanley Cup. They might win the President's Trophy even this year. That's how good they've been. And Bowen Byram doesn't maybe have a spot in the roster. So the fact that his name's been thrown out there is definitely interesting. Now, how this all ties together back to the Canucks is this goes back to the thought that maybe, just maybe, a guy who happens to be, he's formerly played in Vancouver in the WHL. He was part of the Vancouver Giants organization, and that is Bowen Byram. Bowen Byram has played in Vancouver, so the fact that the Canucks have been scouting and looking at a guy like Bowen Byram, it totally makes sense because he's been in Vancouver. He's played in that city with his WHL team back in the day. So something definitely interesting to kind of keep in the back of your mind here going into the deadline. We're talking about the for sure things, right? We're talking about the Claude Giroux, who will definitely be traded. We're talking about guys like probably Arturi Lehkonen in Montreal, or Ben Chiarot, or Mark Giordano. And then you get further down the list, and you have some guys that are a little bit uncertain. Maybe a guy like Tomas Hertl, a guy like JT Miller. And God, who knows? We still have another 2 weeks till the actual deadline. Who knows what other names could be thrown out there between now and the actual deadline. So guys, let me know what you think. In the comment section down below, what do you think of the rumors around potentially seeing JT Miller go to the Avalanche for Bowen Byram? I think that's a pretty massive trade there, and that would definitely make for a pretty interesting deadline, but we'll see what happens. Guys, as always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again next time.